So, good evening again, everybody. It's good to see you. And I was going to do a different prayer to open tonight, but in view of all that's going on in the world
No.
and in view of what we've just been reading for tonight, I thought that nothing would be as appropriate as our Pax Christi Scotland prayer. So if we could start with that, that would be bring us all together. So in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Mhm.
Dear Father in heaven, you see every injustice, every violent act, every contravention of peace. We seek your guidance as we turn to our earthly leaders, hoping to change hearts, convince minds, and empower them to bring peace to the innocent. We pray that you will comfort the wounded, the bereaved, the disinherited. Lord, help us to make our common home a haven of non-violence. Amen. And I'll hand over now to Anna.
Thank you. Well, it's very nice to see everyone again. Thank you all for being here. Last time we looked at the chapter on prayer, so we're thinking about the centrality of prayer for peacemaking, prayer as how we enter into a sphere where we can receive that peace. And we also thought about prayer as a place where we confront violence in our own hearts, and from this, prayer being the place where peacemaking starts. In this session, we'll be thinking about the idea of resistance, particularly the idea of saying no. And we'll have a similar format to last time, so a mixture of breakout rooms, time to discuss, feedback, and group discussion. I thought we'd just start again with maybe just 5 minutes in our breakout rooms, just doing a bit of a check-in and a reflection on what we've found with what we've been reading. Just thinking about what stood out to you in this chapter, were there key themes, quotes, or passages, and maybe anything else that you'd like to share that has been thinking about since we met last time. So I'll pop those in the chat. Okay, those should all be open now. Do I need to add you to a room, or can you add yourself? I think you're muted.
I'm not seeing your stuff in the chat. Why is that?
Oh,
All I'm seeing is the stupid message that I made. True. Ah, there it is. There
yeah.
it. Yes, thank you. Right, I'll go and join somebody then. Right.
Okay. Do you know which group are you going to go in, and I'll go in a different one.
Um. Right. I'll go in one.
Okay. All right. See you shortly.
Okay.
It's not letting me join. Hmm. Is it working for you?
No.
No, me neither. I don't know why that would be.
I just sent that to you there, Anne, the link.
Thank you. Look. Um, oh,
Did you get it?
hold on 1 second. Did you put it in the chat?
Yeah, yeah.
Let's have a look.
I just sent it again. It might have got lost in the.
No, that's it. I've got it. I've got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Just send you. Yeah, it's on the Facebook. It's on his Facebook, but it's also on the YouTube channel.
Okay,
I'll
so
send you the.
we oh, sorry, Marie.
Yeah, no, sorry, we're chatting. Sorry about that.
Don't worry. I think we're all back now. So if we just maybe go around to each of the rooms and just hear a little bit about what you were sharing. If we begin with room 1, so that was Elizabeth, Rab, and Sylvia.
Say something. Well, I could say a few words. We shared some of, words and phrases that struck us that were quite the opposite in the way of some of the language that we're hearing at the moment about the wars.
Yeah.
Which seems to be such a contrast, but also so challenging. I'm just sharing one now that was like, peacemaking is a way of living that involves our whole being all the time. Yeah, that's quite a challenge to live up to. We also spoke about, are there moderate voices in the States? Are there voices of resistance in the States? We don't know enough about it. We knew and we saw protests on the street about ICE, and people shared a little bit about people they know that may be half Iranian or are from Iran and have family members there. And when we read that, forgiveness, call to forgiveness, but obviously very difficult for the people from Iran to be forgiving, wherever to be forgiving. So the language of the gospel is completely radical and contrary to the language that we're hearing today. Is that Rab and Elizabeth saying a little of what we said? You can jump in.
That was excellent, Sylvia. Yeah, I thought I mentioned. I think the book is so apt in reading the signs of the times just now. You would think he'd written it by now. Almost, you could. It's amazing. So challenging.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Rab and Sylvia. In room 2, so that was David, Jan, and Vincent.
Certainly very much said what Rab just said about it could have been written today, sadly.
And room 3, so the room I was in.
Sorry, who is room 3?
That was us.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'll go then. So just what we said was that again, it was very apt. Just like could have been written today. And what someone said was that they were really taken by the fact that the influence of watching violent films, TV, that really could have an impact. That really struck someone, and then the judgment as well that struck. That also has a role to play in it, and just generally very apt. Has anyone else got anything to add?
I was struck by that, the violence in entertainment, and I hadn't thought of how violent that was, and the book was saying how it affects people, especially the young people. It's fascination almost with death, breaking up property and destroying even planets in these what do you call it, planetary wars and so on. Enjoying all that kind of thing, I never noticed that as being come under this heading of violence, very much it does.
We were talking about the interconnectedness of everything as well, and that, even the way that you view yourself, it's important that you have a sense of peace within yourself, because you can't be peaceful. Everything is connected. Even your own desire to be peaceful is affected by what you are like inside of yourself, as well as the sort of external behaviour that you manifest. So.
Yeah, thanks very much, Anne. I think it's really interesting that all of the groups had really similar ideas actually about how it felt it was really relevant for today, because Marion and I were actually talking about that before we jumped on the Zoom call. So yeah, in some ways maybe that's quite bleak, but in other ways maybe it's timely that we're looking at it. What I was going to do next is just give a bit of a summary over the chapter and drawing out some of the key themes, and then we'll go back into our breakout rooms and go through a couple of discussion questions again. So the chapter begins with Nouwen reflecting on his upbringing in Holland and witnessing the atrocities of the Holocaust, and asking why wasn't more resistance happening, why weren't there mass uprisings and marches? And he questions, why did those who pray, sing hymns and go to church not resist the powers of evil so visible in their land? And again, I think probably like lots of you, I found so many of these passages incredibly hard-hitting, and thinking about this today. And this is kind of where he then next takes the chapter. He thinks about this in his own life. So he moves on to the time when he's writing and cites atrocities that are happening then, so nuclear weapons, genocide in Guatemala. And he asks himself the same question. So does my prayer and communion with the God of life become visible in acts of resistance against the power of death surrounding me? Or will children now ask the same questions in the future about him? So from this, he concludes that being a peacemaker today requires that my prayer becomes visible in concrete actions. Without such actions, my prayer remains the pious expression of a fearful mind that has abdicated responsibility for the future. And then, due to the threat of the nuclear holocaust, he says that peacemaking becomes not merely an option, but a holy obligation, which I think someone mentioned. And this way of living then involves our whole being. So he argues then that resistance has to be central to the daily life of the peacemaker. It's not just something that we do every now and then, or when we go to protests. And he talks about resistance in terms in this first bit of the chapter of saying no to all the forces of death wherever they may be, and saying yes, which we'll be looking at next time, to all of life in whatever form we encounter it. So in the saying no, he argues that more than ever before in history, we're surrounded by powers of death, and this impacts all aspects of our life. So, for example, questioning why we should work, why we should have children when we don't know if there will be a future. And he states that more often than not, he's met with, or he sees apathy and despair, rather than people saying no and resisting. But he speaks of how if we're true followers of Jesus, who chose to die on a cross in total disarmament, how can we not be a man of peace? And by remaining passive, non-resistance makes us accomplices. Alongside this, he also speaks of this all-pervasive fascination with death that's an integral part of our daily lives, and how death holds its grip on us in more subtle ways. And he argues that saying no means refuting the more obvious displays of death, such as nuclear weapons, but also these more intimate and less spectacular ways in which we play our death games. It's both peace in the world and peace of heart that must be addressed without a false separation between this inner and outer peace. He breaks down resistance to death through several particular practices. And the first of these, which I think a lot of people resonated with, is confronting entertainment. So Nouwen argues that we are often entertained through images of death and destruction, feeding our fascination with death and violence. And through this, we become desensitized and death becomes an unreal act. And he argues that this is all an unhealthy way to deal with our death instincts and that this has to be discarded. He also talks about death games as appearing in ways in which we make judgments against others, so through caricature or stereotype. And this othering creates enemies and monsters in our mind and therefore offers a rationale for violence and aggression. So he argues that long before we start a war, we've already killed our enemies mentally through dehumanization, which renders relationship and reconciliation impossible. Furthermore, this form of judgment also means that we place ourselves as morally superior in regards to the other, which means we also become blind to our own weaknesses. So saying no starts before any physical violence, but also necessitates a refusal to judge the other. This leads him to then talk about the importance of confronting the powers of death within our innermost selves in the way we think and feel about ourselves. And he speaks of this in terms of spiritual suicide and self-loathing, when we struggle to accept and affirm ourselves. And really this is tied to having true faith and trust. So to trust that we're both loved and forgiven and that we're worthy of this as well. And he reflects that I often think I'm a hesitant peacemaker because I still have not accepted myself as a forgiven person, a person who has nothing to fear and is truly free to speak the truth and proclaim the kingdom of peace. And he talks about this as the hardest of the spiritual struggles, arguing that if people could fully accept that they're loved and forgiven, the world would be very different. And we can think about this perhaps in what he spoke about in the previous chapter, in the previous chapters about that fear or anxiety, our inner wounds that we then enact in the world. So he argues that this wide reach of saying no is necessary to develop a spirituality of peacemaking, and we cannot limit ourselves to just one mode of resistance. He argues that if we feed imagination with violent scenes, give bad names to fellow human beings, or nurture inner disgust, we cannot be witness to life for very long. And this relates to the temptation to hold on to the certainty of death over the uncertainty of life, which is ever-changing and requires trust and surrender to the mystery of the unpredictable. This also links to a death-orientated self-indulgence when confronted with an uncertain future. So he links this fascination with death to hedonism as one way to escape this uncertainty or anxiety. And he says here that they're intimately connected because both lust and death keep our eyes away from the anxiety-provoking future. The real resistance, then, requires the humble confession that we are partners in the evil that we seek to resist, and it is an endless discipline in which we will find that the more we say no, the more we will discover the all-pervasive presence of death, and the more there is to resist. So I just want us to go back into our breakout rooms, I think maybe for about 15 to 20 minutes. And there's just a series of questions I will paste in the chat for us to think about, just draw out some of these themes a bit further. So first of these is, Nouwen argues that we should not be distracted by arguments as to whether peace starts within or without. And what do you make of this claim? Where do you see peace as starting? How far do you agree with his statement that peacework is a spectrum? What do you make of the ways in which Nouwen suggests we should confront the powers of death through eschewing violent entertainment, non-judgment, and self-love? So those sort of three concrete practices that he talks about. And then how do we understand his claim that the world is indeed Satan's territory, and therefore saying no to death is an urgent spiritual task? Can everyone see the questions in the chat okay? Yep, perfect. All right, we'll open the rooms again then. Is that working for you now, Marion? Yeah,
I was just looking to see if you'd spotted June
I
Graham.
did. Yeah,
That's good.
yeah. Excellent.
She, she's she's brilliant. She's very active. Right, I'll go back and join group one.
Okay. All right. See you soon.
Oops.
Well, I hope everyone had as insightful chat as we did, and we got through a lot of different things. David?
I think we lost Vincent.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't us.
Well, I don't think it was.
Well,
We
no.
weren't othering it.
Hopefully he'll rejoin. Thanks for letting us know. I think if we maybe just go around the rooms again and just sort of hear a bit of a summary. Would people prefer to do this question by question, or did we have more of a narrative conversation? Marianne, do you want to lead us on this?
I think I suspect that we had more of a narrative
Okay.
than answering
Okay.
your
We'll do
questions.
a
Sorry,
general.
but
That's fine. They
we
just
were
prompted.
inspired by the questions, and it became a narrative conversation.
Yeah.
What would you say, Rab? Is that fair?
Definitely, well put.
Okay. Well, in that case, should we start with your group? So Elizabeth, Rab. Oh no, we made you go first last time. All right, let's start with my group then. So Anne, Marie, and Thomas.
I took some notes. So we sort of did it question by question and then went off piste at places. We didn't do the last one though. So just the first part, that someone said that peace starts when I let go and I let God be acknowledged by me. And that peace also starts that when that person feels accepted. And another person, Psalm 51, a pure heart creates for me, O God. The heart is the starting point, and it's about not hardening our hearts and journeying towards the pure heart. And if we develop that pure heart, that will take it into action. And it's someone quoted an educator that it's about don't make a donation, but commit to changing systems. And also someone said that we don't have to wait until we're perfectly peaceful. Do you know that the journey, the spectrum, that we can start on that journey wherever we are on that spectrum. And then we went off piste a bit, and we just were saying that someone made a good point about that. There's a difference between feeling uncomfortable and feeling threatened, and that being uncomfortable can make the demands on us to action. And it gave the example of the Good Samaritan there, where the person felt uncomfortable but wasn't threatened, moved the person to action. And then the second line, second dash, we thought that was very perceptive. The entertainment side, that sometimes there can actually be power in the violence, and that there can be a message. For example, like Schindler's List, or the ones related to the Jews, that there was violence, but that there can be a message in it. And that someone mentioned as well that research has shown that since children got telephones, that there's been an increase in anxiety and self-harm associated with the phone use. That someone as well said that, because we were saying how much entertainment now is either violence or sex based, and that it would be maybe an act of resistance for directors to make films that aren't either of these. And also the threshold becomes bigger, the threshold becomes bigger for every time that we're more desensitized, to what's shocking. Basically, the threshold changes. And the last thing then was someone mentioned that the labeling of regimes and things just really humanizes the other side. Does anyone else have anything, Anna or Tomas or?
I think that was incredibly comprehensive. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well done. It's not an easy task. Did anyone else was there anything else people wanted to add? No? Excellent. Should we go to group 2 then? So that was David, Jan, June.
Actually, June touched on what you were saying there, and you gave the example of Schindler's List. We were talking about nowadays it's all computer games and you know, so much pressure on parents and children. But yes, June was making the point that sometimes the violence is an important part of the story, but it is about how you, I suppose, how you portray it, not now a graphic, a graphic way. And also, yeah, I mean, I think we all agreed with the first part that but shouldn't be distracted by whether it starts within or out with. And again, you know, this idea that maybe actually by taking part in peace campaigns, the people that you are mixing with, some of their peacefulness, as it were, passes on to you as well. David had very interesting, and I'll leave him to say something about it, about this last bit about the world is indeed Satan's territory and linking in with the temptations. And I actually agreed with what he was saying, but I'll let him describe it himself.
Thanks, Jen.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
No, I was thinking there that Nouwen conflates what's happening in the temptations in the wilderness and John's Gospel view of the world. And in the temptations in the wilderness, what Jesus is being offered is not the world as the gift of Satan, but political power. And it's a temptation to a shortcut to the kingdom that, you know, you take over the government and you pass laws and you put people in prison if they don't do what you want. And in some ways, the state itself institutionalizes violence within given territorial bounds. So I would see a critique of that as, you know, being a concern for state power rather than the world. Whereas John, in his gospel, tends to see, I think, the world as all those things organized, detached from God. And that's a very different ball game. So I was a bit unhappy about the way that Nouwen expressed that.
Thanks, David. Did anyone else have any thoughts? Oh. I think when I was reading that, part of what I can sort of see the description of that fallenness and need for repair. But then I also wanted to sort of affirm that with the beauty of creation and it's not all bad and sort of, you know, existing in that sphere, I suppose. I don't know. Did anyone else think about this or anything that came to mind for them?
Yes, because when God created the world, I mean, as per Genesis say, I mean, he looked on it and saw it was good. And I do see the creation as a gift of God to, yeah.
Shall we go to group one then? So that was Elizabeth, Rab, and Marianne.
I think Rab has a good take on everything. I didn't come in till a bit late.
I think, yeah, there was that sense of not getting distracted, that you could wait until you were on your deathbed almost and say, oh, I think I finally got it, you know, which is a bit late. And also moving towards the idea that being in community really helps and is very, very important to help getting both dimensions together. And Marion shared about the accompaniment with those who are at the sharp end and being in touch and listening to their story. And I also mentioned just about being able to weep, at times that maybe it'd be good at sometimes just in the mass, just to stop and say, maybe if we think of these people, we could just have a good greet, because there's a sense of powerlessness at times. And we spoke again about the rhetoric that comes about war and that whole way that it dehumanizes people. And I mentioned it's that classic, it's one of the stages of genocide. And it's so frightening to see it happening at such a high level by the most military powerful government in the world. And you think, well, the hope's kind of going a bit. And regarding entertainment, there was that. When I mentioned that, I did that when I did my master's thesis, it was on that, the role of entertainment on adolescence. And I was really surprised to find that there wasn't evidence that it did come out in violent acts or anything, that they were able to distinguish between what was a cartoon. And somebody mentioned that often in these games they play, the person will come back to life in various things. And maybe it took away the whole understanding of what killing is, etc. But there wasn't evidence of that. And the evidence that seemed to bring it together recently, apart from what I studied, was the way it was used by the Department of War of the USA, and how they thought, hey, it's just a big game for killing all these Iranians and that. But, it ties in, and it had a bit of Braveheart or something in it, their clip. And that's more frightening when you have these people who are in charge of the button, etc., thinking it's a big game. So I don't know, Elizabeth, Marion, it was a fascinating discussion.
Yeah. I think where we got to probably reinforces where we started from, that, community is important because it encourages you and it brings you out and you weep together, you build empathy. Whereas the people who live on screens and live in their own fantasy life don't understand the difference between the fantasy and reality. They have no corrective, and they're just losing it, and we're all suffering for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it goes back to what you said, Rab. Adolescents who have a lot of friendships know the difference between real and fantasy. Adolescents who don't, less so. So community and the building of empathy is probably, as Marion said, that's the most fundamental thing.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks, Rab. Is there anything else that people wanted to add or any reflections?
I was just going to say the sort of extension of what Elizabeth and Rab were saying, the way that people are turning to AI friends, artificial intelligence friends, is a kind of extension of that, isn't it? Really, putting their trust and faith and in unreal, not even real people, and that's quite disturbing, I think.
And actually, I think I mentioned there in my breakout room that I watched a fantastic YouTube thing earlier. It's by a guy who's he's Islam in America, but his parents are Iranian, and he's after doing on Saturday just a little talk about the Iranian history, but from the spiritual and human point of view. He specializes in Sufi mysticism. He's a bit like the Richard Rohr of Islam, but he was actually saying about that we are probably seeing the first AI generated war with this one in Iran. And he said that what happened with that school was was apparently it was called Hamni, or the name of that whatever, and that apparently they just look for the names, and it was because of the name of the school that that AI machine targeted that. So I think not only we're probably seeing it in this conflict, I'd say as well, sadly.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. I was thinking about that actually when Rab was talking, that recently there's been certain things that are happening in the news and you feel like life looks more like a film or a video game than reality sometimes. Well, thanks very much everyone for their input today. Is there anything else people wanted to add, or any final thoughts?
Just somebody mentioned there, Anna, about empathy and compassion, and I think you know, this is where the human encounter comes in. That if if we're only dealing through computers or phones and so forth, we're not actually encountering other human beings, and we lose our ability to communicate.
Yeah.
And I was struck by on page 61, Henri Nouwen, where he talks about, I vividly remember encountering a man who never judged anyone. And he says, what do you talk about when you have nobody to discuss or judge? And it's a great question. And he says then, discovering that he did not judge me, I gradually came to realize a new inner freedom within myself. I realized that I had nothing to defend, nothing to hide, and that I could be myself in his presence without fear. So I thought that was quite powerful, that suddenly I don't have to play games here, and not don't have to put on a mask. I can just be myself, because that other person is not judging and is just accepting. So I thought that was quite a powerful piece as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. Next time we'll look at the second part of the chapter, which I hope will be slightly more uplifting. Marianne will be thinking about saying yes, so it definitely sounds more positive. Marianne, I'll hand over to you then to finish.
Thank you, as always, Anna, and thank you, everybody. I know that in my group, it's always very inspiring to hear everybody's comments and everybody's thoughts. And I'd just like to finish with a very short prayer, which thanks go to our Irish friends, because it's a Celtic prayer. And I thought that it's one that I love and say quite a lot, especially at this time. So if we could perhaps just finish with that. Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Calm me, O Lord, as you still the storm. Still me, Lord, keep me from harm. Let all the conflict within me cease. Enfold me, Lord, in your peace. Amen.
Amen. Lovely prayer.